Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard, brought to you by our sponsor, The Great Game of Business. I'm Lauren Feldman, and I'm here with Gene Marks. Welcome, Gene.
Hello, Lauren. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing good. Enjoying the Jersey Shore.
Excellent.
Only a couple more weeks left of the summer, Lauren. It's unbelievable.
I know. How does that happen?
It is a bummer.
I hate to admit this in public, but I feel like I'm like an elementary school kid. I'm going to start crying about the end of summer in about 5 minutes.
And meanwhile, like all these schools are going back to school like in the middle of August. Do you ever notice that? Like,
yeah,
it's
I know.
really weird. Like,
that would have killed me.
I don't know if you did that way when you were a kid. I always went to school like after Labor Day, but now all these schools are starting so earlier, you know?
All right, let's talk business.
Sure.
So, Gene, as you know, I try to avoid politics as much as possible here, and I want to try to stick to that. But you've recently written a piece about Kamala Harris and her policies and how they affect small businesses. And the Democratic convention is this week. So I'd like to try to kind of thread the needle, if we can, talking about the issues that matter to business owners without necessarily wading into the politics and the insanity. Do you think we can do that?
I think we can. And I know that you want to talk about this piece that I wrote for The Hill just this past week, right?
Exactly. That piece was headlined, How Kamala Harris Can Win Over Small Businesses. Give us a sense of what your thinking was.
First of all, before we dig into the piece, I do want to say that you actually inspired this piece, Lauren. You did.
Wow.
Can you believe that? Not because of your undying love and devotion to Kamala Harris, of course not, but because you said to me, it was either last week or a couple weeks ago, you made the comment to me that you would enjoy more me giving my opinions on how things can be improved, like not just bitching and moaning about stuff, which I have been doing more lately, and more, more sort of positive and like making more like, whatever. And I thought about that long and hard, and you're absolutely right. I know it was a rare occasion, but you were absolutely right. And I thought, and I've been doing this now. I mean, the past few pieces I've been writing, I've been thinking to myself, like, all right, instead of like just complaining, let me talk about it. So Kamala Harris.
Well, let me just say I'm honored by that. I appreciate it. It doesn't mean I'm not going to try to pick the piece apart as much as I can.
Of course not. Yeah, I'm not trying to butter you up or anything. I'm just telling you, like, you really were the impetus, because I wrote this like actually 2 weeks ago, and then it just got published this week. And so, and I also want to be on record. I mean, one thing that I love about this podcast is that we can be completely transparent. I am a registered Republican right now. Okay. I've always been. I have voted for the last 3 Democratic. I think the last Republican president I actually voted for was Bush. Believe it or not, no, it was Romney when he went against Obama. I have to also, just full transparency, I've been skewing towards Trump this year. Again, full transparency, taxes is a big issue to me. Frankly, Israel is also a big issue to me. I just want your listeners to know what the context is coming from. But when Harris gets, as she's going to be the presumptive nominee, I did think to myself, I said, like, how could she win me over? As somebody who's kind of leaning towards Trump as a moderate Republican, what could she do? Now, I want to stay away from the social issues. Like you said, let's keep it business. So what from the business side could she do that would really make me like, shit, like this, maybe I will vote for her if she were to do some of these things. And that was the impetus for writing this column. I wanted to get that out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I didn't think we were going to get into
that doesn't make sense.
It makes sense. I didn't think we were going to get into who we were actually leaning to or thinking about voting for, but good for you. Transparency is a good thing.
Hey, Lauren, you're the one that has always urged full transparency on this conversation. So this is a full transparent, conversation. So I looked at Harris, and I looked at, she's going against Trump, and there are certain things that I do think that she could do that would really have a big impact on me. So let me go through a couple. I don't know if you want to stop me after each one. We talked a lot about taxes before, so we don't have to beat a dead horse on that. But I have said on this podcast how if the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017 expires, it will have a significant impact on both individuals and small businesses, including my business, where I could see my taxes go up somewhere around 20% if all these provisions expire. And one of the things that I feel, Harris could do is maybe she does look at that and she cherry picks. Maybe, okay, I know that the Democrats, they want to let this legislation expire, so they can increase taxes on the wealthy and go after, taxpayers that aren't paying their taxes and all of that. But maybe, just maybe, she could pull a provision like, say, the Qualified Business Income Tax Credit, which is a huge, deduction, which is a huge deduction. That's part of the Tax Cuts and Job Acts. That's for the pass-through businesses like mine, where, whenever we make in our business, we can immediately deduct 20% of that income before the income hits my personal tax return. So if I made $1,000 this year, $800 gets taxed. The other, $200 does not. That's a huge tax deduction, and that goes away in 2025, and that impacts a lot of small businesses. So my thought, one thing that would really, turn my head a bit is if Harris were to step up and be like, yeah, we are going to let this expire. However, I do support continuing that one provision, or making it permanent. So that was one thing, Lauren. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
We have talked about this before, so I don't want to go into it too deep. The only thing I would say is we actually agree on this. I hope that I liked your suggestion that she cherry pick and that she focus on the items that would affect small businesses, and this one in particular. I would point out, I think there is a discussion that doesn't get had there a lot, which is that 20% deduction you're talking about is obviously most beneficial to the most successful business owners. I don't know what percentage that is of business owners, but it's probably a fairly small percentage. You referred in your piece to how a lot of businesses are struggling right now, and obviously, if you're not making money, you're not getting that deduction. I do think there might even be ways to improve that so that more businesses benefit from the money that's not going to the Treasury.
Yeah, when I say struggling, I don't mean they're unprofitable. I think a lot of businesses actually are profitable. Maybe they could be more profitable, or not. Or maybe they're not as profitable as before. We're all challenged. We're all struggling. That goes without saying. But I think for any business making a profit, this is a significant deduction for them. Particularly
obviously, the more you make, the bigger the deduction, and the more valuable it is to you.
Yeah, correct. But the assumption is that you're making money, and and that's what the case is. But anyway, that is one. That is definitely one provision, one tax move she could make that would really cause my head to turn. So that's one thing. Okay. The other thing has to do with regulations. Again, we've talked as well on this podcast, and over the past 3 years, the Biden administration has really, through its agencies, implemented a lot of regulations on worker classifications and overtime rules, and OSHA rules and FTC non-competes, and things like that, which cost. They're across the board. They don't really. They're for all businesses. And I'm like, if Harris, were to come out and say, we're going to make these regulations, only apply to businesses with more than a certain number of employees, for example, or over a certain size. In other words, excluding small businesses from some of these things. I think that would go a long way. I think that would, obviously big companies can afford to pay more for overtime, or afford to deal with worker classification, making more people employees. So I thought revisiting those regulations and adjusting them for small businesses, I think also would be a very positive step that could help her win some votes.
If I may suggest another thing for you to put on your to-do list, I would love to see you write a piece about regulations that really goes into the ones that you think are most impactful and what could be done to make them more palatable to businesses. So, for example, I'm not sure which regulations apply to all businesses and which ones, have a carve out for businesses with fewer than a certain number of employees. You probably know all that stuff. I think it would be really interesting to see a piece that really breaks it down, because so much of what you read about regulations is kind of a blanket. They're either all good or all terrible.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a good idea. And that is, for example, I speak, what hits me the most is the worker classification one, Lauren, because my business, we use a lot of independent contractors, and they're really on the gray line as to whether or not they should be employees or not. And, so and that this regulation applies to everybody, to businesses of all sizes. So you're right. I mean, I could take that as a topic and talk not only how that impacts business owners that have employees and contractors, but also freelancers, because there are many that don't want to be employees of companies. So fair enough. That's also a good point. So let me talk about some more. Okay.
Please.
We had talked before we went on the air, and I'm going to jump down a little bit in my column about succession planning. There is, the average age of the U.S. small business owner now is over the age of 55. I mean, many of my clients are talking about succession planning, and there are definitely some issues that would be created by Harris becoming president. Again, this is assuming she supports all of President Biden's proposed tax policies. One would be, estate tax rates. The exemption for assets would be dropped significantly from what they are now. So potentially more assets could be taxed that way. Number two is President Biden has always supported a change in what's called the step up provision of assets, meaning that it's without getting into the weeds, it's how capital gains are recorded on assets. You step up the value when they're passed on or when they're transacted, so that it reduces the gain at a certain point, or increases the gain at one point and then reduces it going forward. That has a negative impact on succession planning. Capital gains rates themselves have been proposed to increase. President Biden's policies would increase capital gains to as much as like 44%, Lauren, on some high earners, that could be some business owners. And then, there's a lot, there's ESOPs. There was some really fantastic tax advantages for employee stock ownership plans for employers that sell to their employees. So, my thoughts are, succession planning is a real hot button for a lot of business owners. If Harris were to look at those provisions, capital gains, step up provisions, estate tax rates, and maybe qualify them more so that they were less harmful to business owners selling their businesses. If she were to take another look at employee stock ownership plans and maybe consider, and again, I would have some suggestions for making them even more attractive for businesses to sell to their employees. I think a lot of that stuff would really attract a lot of business owners to her, because it's become such a big issue. And that's another topic. I'm going to, we talked about this before we started recording, but I want to dig into that further and write about it, because I think there's a lot that she could be doing. Same thing with President, potentially Trump if he's elected, but no one seems to talk about this right now. And it's a big issue for small businesses.
Well, in some ways, for many, it's the biggest. And I think there's one aspect of it that I didn't hear you address directly, although you may have been thinking of it. And that's, with the silver tsunami right now, there are a lot of businesses that almost can't be sold, or literally cannot be sold. They're businesses where the owner is too much a part of the day-to-day operation, or there are all sorts of reasons. I wonder if there isn't something that could be done to try to create incentives for those businesses to be passed on to an employee, not necessarily through the complicated means of an ESOP, which is expensive and bureaucratic, but something simpler that could save some of these businesses from just disappearing. Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, it's really, really great topic. I mean, as you know, I speak to a lot of industry groups. A lot of the members of these groups come from the fruited plain, between New York and San Francisco. You're running a gasket distributorship or a process equipment manufacturing company somewhere in Arkansas or Iowa. They're not exactly sexy, and they're definitely not super attractive. And you're right that improving, giving you the ability to sell to your employees, having more tax incentives to do that would be one thing. Making more tax incentives available to larger companies in the industry to buy these companies, at a better and more fair price, instead of having a fire sale, could also be something that I think would be of real interest, as long as they retain jobs, for example. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done in that area. And I'll be giving it more thought and making some more concrete suggestions. But it's a hot area, and I think that would, again, getting back to the topic of this column, what would it take for Harris to really win over small business owners? And we've just talked about a few of the things that I think would really make a difference, at least to me.
All right, so let me challenge you on another topic that you referred to in your piece, and that's immigration. You kind of put it on Kamala Harris to, I think your words were, to sort this out with Congress. To figure out a solution to a problem that's been around for way too long. Obviously, our system doesn't work, and we've been unable to solve that. It really should be solved. I guess a couple of things. One, I think you could have mentioned that there was a deal in place that Democrats were behind and that Biden was ready to sign, and that a lot of Republicans thought was the best deal they could ever hope for in terms of taking strong measures to take action on the border and stop the flow of undocumented people into this country. I think you could have mentioned that, and I think it's worth noting that it's not completely up to the next president. There are two sides to this equation.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think about like the school shooting in Massachusetts when Obama was president, and then Obama introduced legislation to like cut back on the sale of firearms, and it didn't pass, and everybody was like, "You got to be kidding me!" Right? I mean, that's the same thing with the immigration. You're right. There was a deal. It was a couple of years ago, and it was,
no, it was this summer.
Yeah, oh, you're right. They've been working on it.
It was Donald Trump who blew it up.
Yeah.
If you're comparing the two potential presidents, one of them was in favor of a deal that could have gone a long way to solving this problem. The other one blew it up.
I hear you, and I think that obviously it's highly politicized and not the easiest issue to solve. But you know what, Lauren, so was civil rights. Back in the '60s. Civil rights legislation was stalled all during the Kennedy administration until Johnson became president and was able to move it forward. It seemed like at the time that the country would never pass the civil rights legislation. You wound up doing it, as well as Social Security and Medicare, back in 1965. These are huge, massive issues. Immigration is a huge issue. I know for a fact, when I again travel around the country and speak to thousands of people, because we talk about these issues, immigration is a bipartisan issue, and people agree that it needs to be fixed. And I do think there's a lot of political theater going on that is getting in the way of doing this. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not blaming Harris or saying like you need to do this or you fail, but I think it's the role of a president to try and bring both parties together and have some sort of a compromise and get something passed. And I and the reason why I say that is because if she were to say this is going to be my biggest priority is to get an immigration deal done, it's top of the list. And yes, I will cave on certain things for my Republican counterparts in Congress, and I will hold to these certain things. And she makes it a priority. That's what presidents do. And I only say that because I have so many clients and so many people that are business owners that are begging for a solution to immigration. There's a dark side of immigration, Lauren. I've bookmarked a few articles just recently of businesses that got caught with illegal immigrants. They hire these people, they treat them like shit, they don't pay them very well, and not only that, then they underprice their services, so law-abiding businesses can't even win deals because they get outpriced by people that are hiring illegals. So it's a problem for businesses, let alone the fact that we can't find enough workers. So again, it's a small business issue, and I would love to see a president. I'd love to see her step up and say, we are going to get this done. Compromise or not, we're going to get it done. I'd like to hear that.
I do think something that gets lost in this conversation a lot is, especially if you're going to use the term illegal immigrants. I mean, we are talking about human beings here. And that's why a lot of people have moved to referring to undocumented workers as the term instead. But I also think it's worth noting that, Trump's policy is to remove all undocumented people, and
Right.
that's 12 million people, which would have a huge impact on small businesses and the economy and the country as a whole. But we're talking about business issues here. What that would do to the labor force, and it's not just.
Well, if they're undocumented, the theory is they shouldn't be in the labor force, right?
Well, that may be your theory, but keep in mind, there are people who've been here undocumented for decades, and some of them came at a time when that really wasn't a problem. In fact, they were encouraged, they were welcomed. People thought they were the only ones who would be willing to do certain jobs, and some of them were seasonal, some of them stayed beyond the time that they were supposed to, whatever. Many of them have been here for many, many years, putting down roots, raising families, paying taxes, not getting Social Security. If we just uprooted all of them because we think they're here, because we think they're illegals, that's going to have a huge impact. And you can talk about it from a humanitarian standpoint, but if we just talk about it from a business standpoint, you're talking about, I don't know, what is that, 4% of the population, 12 million people? We just saw what happened with the Great Resignation and after the pandemic, when you don't have people rushing back into the workforce, what that can do. I think that's a huge issue that I don't necessarily see you addressing when you're comparing candidates and writing about this coming election.
Well, no, not in the 800 words that I'm allowed can I address like an issue like that, and it does certainly deserve its own column. I mean, and also, Lauren, I mean, listen, like all issues, social and business, there are two sides to every opinion, and we can't judge,
Sure we can.
and we can't be intolerant. We can't be intolerant of people that have a different point of view. Your points of view on the illegal immigrants, the fact that it's a long time issue and there are humans involved.
I see you're very comfortable with that term still, aren't you?
Sorry, they're undocumented. I feel that I think your point of view is very, very well justified, but I think you also have to you have to have respect for other people's point of view that say, like, if they're here illegal, they're illegal. Like, why even have laws if they're here illegal? And which really gets back to the column that I wrote and Harris, which is, short of deporting everybody, and I know that is what Trump wants to do, or short of keeping everybody here illegally because they're breaking the law needs to be fixed and changed. And that's what our politicians are supposed to be doing, which gets me back to Harris and saying that we need a leader in the White House who will get a new law done, change the existing law, and figure out a solution with these undocumented people. Nope, not everybody is going to be happy with the solution, but we need a solution because right now there is none. And that, I think, is what we're looking for a leader. And I think if we heard a leader say that, I think it would make a big difference to a lot of small business owners. I agree with you. Just sit there and deporting 12 million people is an extreme point of view. But then again, letting 12 million people, illegal people breaking the law who shouldn't be here, just live here.
But keep in mind, again, a lot of those people weren't breaking the law when they came here. And,
if they weren't breaking the law, why aren't they documented?
Well, because the system is broken, and
right.
they many decades ago they were encouraged to come. They've they're not out murdering people, despite what we sometimes hear. I know you're not. You're certainly not. But that is part of the conversation at large.
They're humans. These are families with children, and I get it. You pick them up, and it's terrible.
Let me address one issue that I think doesn't get enough attention because business owners can't talk about it, but at least not publicly. I've talked to many privately. I bet this is true for many of your clients as well. They have people who are undocumented who have been working with them for 10, 20 years. They are very valued employees. They've been incredibly loyal and hardworking. And everybody, the business owners have actually done everything right. They are not breaking the law. And when these people came to work for them, there was no E-Verify. They weren't told to get rid of them. E-Verify came into an existence. But, I've talked to owners who showed me the paperwork. They get reports from the federal government saying there isn't a match on Social Security numbers. There's something going on here, but they are told specifically that they are not supposed to take any action because of this. So you have an owner who has a situation where they have these really valuable employees who are part of the, have been part of the business for decades. What are they supposed to do? It's a really tough situation that I think has more nuance than people appreciate, in part because those business owners can't talk about it without calling attention to the fact that they're employing people who are undocumented, which could put those people at risk.
I mean, Lauren, a handful of times I've worked with clients who have discovered they have undocumented people working for them, good people, good workers, but undocumented. And in every single one of those cases, they had to let them go. And that was that. And in some of those cases, it was on my advice. I mean, as good as these people are, if they're undocumented,
why did you feel they had to be let go?
Because they're breaking the law as an employer. I mean, they are literally breaking the law. And they could be subject to not only federal but state, fines. If their competitors found out they were doing something like this, or other family members, they could be reported to INS. It's a huge risk for a business owner. And then none of my clients wanted to see themselves showing up on some online news site saying that they were hiring illegal or undocumented immigrants in their business. They're breaking, if they're not documented, Lauren, they don't have a green card, they're not allowed to work. It's breaking the law. And what I don't understand, your point of view, is that where do you draw the line? Why have any laws at all? Why do we have laws against, speeding or laws against killing people? I mean, let's have no laws at all if we can just break them. We have to have laws and we have to abide by them.
Wait a second. You've told us you're considering voting for Donald Trump. I mean, you're taking an extreme position about breaking the law here when it's a situation that has existed for decades and has been a problem that hasn't been solved, and through no fault of the business owners and no fault necessarily of the employees.
My reason for leaning towards Trump has to do with two big issues that are the most important to me. He, both personally and as a public policy figure, represents, many things that I don't agree with. And I'll never agree with any candidate's positions on everything. But on the two most important things for me, we are in agreement. And that is what is driving me towards leaning in his direction. So to say that I'm fully in agreement with his position to deport 12 million illegal immigrants is incorrect. I'm not, just because I vote for him.
No, I didn't say that. I said that he's had some issues with the law. And if you're saying that there's a bright line that if anybody breaks any law, then we should, why do we even have laws?
I think
that would be an issue. And by the way, you talked about business owners.
That's way down on my list of priorities. But when you say he has issues with the law, because he's a felon right now of his 34 counts that he was.
That he's also not allowed to operate a business in the state of New York.
I mean, again, like I said, when I list my top 10 things that impact me that I really care about, it's not on that list. It's just, you have to choose what's really important. Where you have your priorities.
All right, well, but you mentioned the thing about business owners not wanting to show up in stories saying that they hire undocumented workers. That's happened to Donald Trump numerous times too,
Yeah, but I don't see the connection. To me, the connection is, if we're talking about immigration and getting back to the Hill piece, some political leader, whether it's Trump or Harris, and in this piece it's about Harris, needs to take a stand and say, we're going to get an immigration bill done. And it's going to take, a lot of compromise to do, but there needs to be a path for citizenship. I don't think that we should be deporting 12 million people. But at the same time, I don't.
Were you okay with the bill that they did get done?
Yeah, it was definitely I would have supported that bill. It was definitely a large step in the right direction. Although I didn't agree with all the provisions of it, and that's, again, I don't remember the specifics, so I can't get into the weeds as to what I didn't agree with. But I remember not agreeing with it all. But overall, I was in agreement with it. I think Lauren, that we need something. Do you know what I mean? Like, clearly we're like in a situation where we have a very broken system, and whatever is going to be passed is not going to be loved by everyone. But we need a new immigration bill that business owners can turn to and say, listen, this is what the law is. This is what I need to do to abide by the law, so it's clear for me, so then I can go and run my business. And right now, when you have a law that says you've got undocumented citizens or undocumented people working for you, you're breaking the law. But then, like you said, you've got other parts of the government telling you, no, it's okay, don't do anything at all. That creates uncertainty for a business owner. Who needs that? We don't. We need more clarity as to what the immigration rules are. And right now, we don't have that. And I would be supporting Harris more if she were to step up and say, this is what I'm going to do about immigration.
And that makes sense to me. I would just add, if you look at the history of these people, the candidates and their positions and what's transpired over, recent months, you can come to your own conclusion right now as to which side is more likely to actually move for a meaningful resolution to this problem.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, but Harris, when it comes to immigration, though, there's a difference between taking a stand on what you'd like it to be and explaining how you're going to get there, And unfortunately, like we saw this summer when the immigration bill was shot down, it needs more than that from our leaders, whoever our president is. And it also needs flexibility and the ability to compromise. So I understand people can propose their immigration stand, their policies. I'm most interested in, if that's your policy, how do you plan on actually getting there? And that's what I'd like to hear.
We still friends?
We are always friends, dude.
All right. That's what I wanted to hear. What are you working on, Gene? What should we look for this week?
I am going to be writing another AI piece about ChatGPT and all the things that have happened. And also a piece I'm going to write for The Hill, talk about politics. There are a lot of Wall Street investors and big money investors that support, Harris. And you would think that goes against the common convention, like why would these rich dudes be supporting, a Harris administration who says she's going to be taxing the rich? And they have good reasons for doing it. And I want to write for The Hill, like why there are, many people on Wall Street who do support her. So that's another piece I'm going to work on.
That's also true in Silicon Valley. Interesting.
It is. And it is, you would be like, why would they support her? It seems like she's pro-worker and tax the wealthy and, why would the wealthy support a candidate like that? But there's other reasons why that I'll dig into.
Well, I felt like we had to do this at some point, and I thought this was a good time to do it. I'm hoping we're not going to come back to this topic for a little while, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's fun to, it's fun to talk about. It's really important to talk about.
It is.
It'd be interesting to get feedback, from your community as well, where their points of view are, and to discuss, those points of view. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I do think that the elections are so important to business owners this year, Lauren, that I don't think we should be ignoring them. I don't think we should be having conversations and pretending it's not happening. I think we should be talking about it. And I think the best part about this conversation is clearly I lean, to the right and you lean to the left. And I think it's good. And yet we both are friends and we are both have the interests of business owners. So I think it's, I don't think a better way to have a conversation than for you and I to talk about this stuff.
I agree. Gene Marks is a CPA who writes weekly on small business for The Guardian, The Hill, The Philadelphia Inquirer, The Washington Times, The Chicago Daily Herald, Forbes, and Entrepreneur. You can also hear him on ABC Radio's Eye on the World with John Batchelor. Gene hosts 2 small business podcasts with Paychex Corporation and The Hartford. This episode was brought to you by The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to help build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com/21hats. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Lauren. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Take care.